It wasn't just Meet the Press that was horrible. Biden spokesman / third string fill-in host for This Week, Jonathan Karl. He had Nancy Mace on, the congresswoman from South Carolina. And over again, he keeps saying there's no evidence about Joe Biden.
We're talking about a significant sum of money. We are talking about bribery. And in the Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, that is the basis for impeachment.
There's no evidence of bribery.
There are witnesses. The 1023 form, there are,
And you've been investigating. You're on the oversight.
There is evidence. We can't say that there's no evidence when there is evidence. And quite frankly,
there's no evidence connected.
It was the fourth estate. It was the media and journalists when Nixon was going down that helped do that investigation, helped bring down the president when he broke the law. And, you guys want to deny that there's evidence. It's everywhere. And the bank records will prove it out.
All right, we will see.
No evidence. That's the big talking point on the left. And again, they got the talking point. We can tell. Everyone in the media, everyone on the left, it's almost like they're all reading off the same sheet. He says no evidence. And Nancy Mace literally goes, you mean unless the phone calls, the videos, the SARS forms, which is the suspicious activity reports that banks file to the federal government, not the other way around, the banks file and saying, hey, this looks a little shady, not the testimony from Devin Archer and others. Those are all things called evidence. You may not believe it. It may not convict the person. That is evidence. And over again, they say there's no evidence. It is unbelievable that these guys, and remember, I lived through this, the Steele dossier. There was no evidence. I debunked it out of the gate. I said, one of the big things is Michael Cohen's passport going to Prague. Here's his passport. He never left the country, couldn't have gone to Prague. Well, we're still going to pursue the Steele dossier because, that's what we do. What? That's what we're dealing with. In the case of the Steele dossier that was financed by the DNC, they didn't care if there was evidence. They suppressed it. You weren't allowed to talk about it online. It got you banned. The Twitter account for the New York Post got shut off. But in this case, where there's literally discussions, emails, bank accounts, video, and the president's own words saying, I was never involved. Well, here you are now calling into business meetings. That's called evidence. Now, maybe it's not enough to convict him. Maybe it's not overwhelming or whatever, but you cannot say there's no evidence. That's actually a false statement. But listen, John Karl over and over again. I don't know it is unbelievable to watch this kind of stuff happen. And then the show goes on, right? And he gets into the gun charge against Hunter Biden. A gun charge, by the way, which he's already pled guilty to. It's just the deal fell apart. And Jonathan Karl goes, well, no one, first of all, one of the panelists, Sarah Isgur, says, well, what about you guys? You've always complained about background checks, stricter gun control, and you're just dismissing this. And you know what, Jonathan Karl, by the way, his own network talks about the gun violence and the need for more laws, and they are all in on going after Second Amendment rights. They're in. And here's John Karl. No one ever gets charged with this. And she literally says, no, that's not true. It is unbelievable to watch this stuff happen. This is so contradictory to what ABC News and all Democrats believe. And yet it's Hunter Biden. And then he dismisses it. He says, but the only reason the gun was taken away was because they were trying to protect him. They threw it in a trash can by a school. If this was anybody else, these guys would be going nuts, but it's Hunter Biden, so let it go. And by the way, no one ever gets charged with this. Yes, they do. And it's amazing that you're downplaying it. What a hack. All right, the other thing I want to give you guys is, all of this talk about 2024, that's a year away. But there's some big races. We got a Kentucky governor's race. There's some legislative races. Not some. The legislature's up in New Jersey. And in Virginia, the whole state house is up, the Senate and the House of Delegates. This is a big deal, though, for Governor Glenn Youngkin, because Youngkin has had to deal with a Democratic Senate. So he hasn't gotten a lot done. But if he can show that he's a big winner, this is what all of these big donors want to see, is can he actually show that he's a political powerhouse? And then they try to fund him. This is like the double, triple bank shot. But Youngkin, if he can win back the state Senate and keep the House of Delegates in Virginia, he's going to try to make the case that he's this political hero. and the big donors will come in and, again, total triple bank shot. But that's what's going on right now. There was a big, huge twist, though, because the House of Delegates is tenuously held by Republicans. There's one critical seat right side of Richmond, though, that is unbelievable. There's this candidate, and she and her husband during COVID, to make money, engaged in some, let's just call them adult activities where you could tip them to do things. Apparently, this didn't go over too well with Virginia Senator and former VP nominee Tim Kaine. He's now distancing himself like, I didn't know this. I'm not aware of that. It is pretty funny, though. You're watching Tim Kaine literally say that he doesn't know who this candidate is that he just stood next to, who is critical to Democrats winning back the House of Delegates in Virginia, because apparently, she and her husband, well, again, they were involved in some adult activities on video that you could pay them to do additional things for. She's not dropping out. This will be one to watch on election night. Back here in Washington, another interesting week. We've got, as I said, we're careening towards this government shutdown. The federal government shuts down the end of the month, October 1st, new fiscal year. If there's no spending bills passed, shuts down. And in that, you've got impeachment going on, and then the fate of McCarthy as speaker all hanging in the balance. So there was this deal announced last night that two critical factions of the House Republican Conference had come to an agreement on a bill to avoid a government shutdown for another month. This is going to be a 30-day short-term deal because there are 12 bills that are needed to pass Congress, and the president would sign them, that keep the government funding, and they're all in the different sections. So you've got Homeland Security, National Defense, labor and health, et cetera, right? They've only done one. So they got a lot to figure out. So you had this short-term 30-day, they call it a CR, a continuing resolution, to get things going for another month. And you got the House Freedom Caucus and the House Main Street Partnership together. One of the things that they put in was this H.R. 2. We talked about that with Congressman Keith Self the other day. This is border protections thing. That even got in. So it was a lot of hopeful stuff. An 8% across the board cut in domestic spending. That's a big deal. It fell apart. Literally, you saw after the deal had been put together by Byron Donalds, who's no shrinking violet, Scott Perry, the head of the Freedom Caucus, members started coming out of the woodwork. And remember, McCarthy has less than a handful to play with. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.